Hello everyone and welcome. In this video, we will see how to plan migration of MongoDB server deployments to Azure with Azure Migrate. With Azure Migrate, you can discover and assess MongoDB instances for migration to Azure Document DB and Azure VM, specifically talking in terms of enabling migration and modernization of MongoDB workloads. With the new MongoDB assessment capability for migration to Azure, you can understand readiness and blockers to migration, recommended target Azure service and right-sized SKU, as well as the reasoning behind the recommendation. You can also identify cost estimates of running your MongoDB server deployments on Azure, as well as migration guidance. That is, the steps you need to perform to be able to migrate using the recommended approach. Before you assess and effectively plan migration of MongoDB server deployments to Azure, you must ensure that all prerequisites for the successful discovery of MongoDB server are met and all discovery issues are resolved. To learn more about the prerequisites, visit aka.ms Azure Migrate /MongoDB Discovery. Once discovery is successfully completed, you can navigate to the Databases blade to initiate a MongoDB assessment. You can select the MongoDB instances that you want to assess and click on Create Assessment. While creating an assessment, you can specify properties for Azure Target, such as target region for migration, default environment type of source workload, i.e. dev test or prod, such that appropriate pricing and SKU can be applied. Currency, savings options such as pay-as-you-go, 1 or 3 year reserved instance, or Azure Savings Plan, and assessment criteria. You can also indicate if you want to bring your own Windows server or selected Linux server license to Azure with Azure Hybrid Benefit when migrating to Azure VM. By clicking on Edit Defaults, you can specify the target service tier to the offering you would like to leverage, or you can leave them to their default values to let Azure Migrate decide what is best for you. After specifying all the details, you can click on Review and Create Assessment. If all looks good, you can click on Create. The assessment is ready for review within a few minutes. You can see that we have assessed 2 servers and 2 instances. Further, we can see that none of our instances are out of support. You can view the readiness for different migration approaches for MongoDB server instances and databases, as well as the estimated cost for running those workloads in Azure. You can choose to dive deeper into reports targeted at respective MongoDB deployment targets in Azure, such as Azure Document DB and Azure VM, or refer the summarized recommended report. The recommended report indicates the most efficient way of migrating your MongoDB server deployments to Azure based on the selected migration preference. Azure Migrate considers both the migration readiness and the estimated cost, such that no MongoDB deployments are left behind, even those that haven't been discovered completely. In this case, it is recommending, based on our intent to modernize, that we replatform both the MongoDB server instances to PaaS. Going deeper, I can see that the PaaS service being recommended is Azure Document DB. Now, let's look at the details of the assessment for localhost.localdomain 27017 on localhost.localdomain, which is a MongoDB instance, and represents the data layer for an app I am interested in modernizing. We can see that it is ready for migration to Azure, and the recommended target is Azure Document DB, given the intent to modernize specified earlier. The recommended configuration includes M60, 16 vCore, 64 GB memory from compute standpoint, and 128 GB of premium SSD storage, which costs around $1,930. Additionally, we can go deeper to view aggregated performance. The Readiness tab helps understand the readiness for all MongoDB targets on Azure. To understand warnings for modernization to Azure Document DB, we can see that we will have to address a few warnings, but these are non-blocking changes for migration to Azure in general. The Target Recommendations tab explains how the ideal target was determined. In this case, the MongoDB server was ready for Azure Document DB. Additionally, the cost of running this instance on Azure is estimated to be the lowest among the two. We can see that the recommended tool for the job is Azure Document DB Migration Extension. Azure Migrate's recommendations have got us covered, even when we didn't have the right credentials or permissions to discover the MongoDB deployment accurately, so that we don't leave any MongoDB deployment behind. Now, let's explore directional reports for respective targets. especially the PaaS ones, since they are operationally cost-effective to run and maintain. Jumping to MongoDB to Azure Document DB only readiness report, we can identify that both MongoDB instances are ready for migration to Azure Document DB. We can view its target SKU cost readiness and migration guidance. You can see that Azure Migrate provides dedicated assessment reports for MongoDB Server on Azure VM, which is targeted at a lift and shift or replication-based approach for migrating to Azure VM with least effort. We can view recommended Azure VM target, SKU, cost, readiness, issues and warnings, and migration guidance. You can review the compute and storage cost distribution for migrating MongoDB to Azure Document DB or MongoDB Server on Azure VM. At any moment, you can go to Settings and customize the assessment by changing selections for reserved capacity, migration strategy, Azure Hybrid Benefit, etc., to see how the cost varies and choose the combination that works best. Additionally, you can export the assessment report for sharing or offline consumption. So this demo covers everything that we have in Azure Migrate to help you discover and assess your MongoDB server instances at scale. We've included Azure MongoDB assessment creation and its various options, deployment target for MongoDB hosted on-premises on Azure, and right-sized SKU recommendations, and associated reasoning and migration guidance, as well as cost details to make it easier for you to start prioritizing your data migrations with Azure Migrate. As you get started, you can leverage the resources on this screen, such as the Azure Migrate documentation. Once discovery and assessment are completed and you have built a high-confidence migration plan, you can leverage Azure Document DB Migration VS Code extension capability to migrate your MongoDB server deployments to Azure Document DB, or use Azure Migrate's server migration capability to lift and shift your servers to Azure virtual machines. You can even perform a test migration without impacting our production workloads before the actual migration. Thank you for watching this video.